Hi there. I'm not a Bible teacher, but I really feel that there's something that's missing often. And I watch a lot of Christian TV, and I see it frequently, where we do tithes and offerings, but we don't separate the tithe and the offering. We just seem to lump them together. And to me, they should be separate. They're two separate things. I just want to give you a scripture from Malachi 3 verse 10. It says, "Bring all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house, and prove me now wherein saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it." It's an interesting blessing. That's the blessing of Abraham. And as covenant people, we are under the blessing of Abraham. Anybody who's saved is under the blessing of Abraham. Now, I want to use this greenhouse and my propagation table as an analogy for this. Sorry, I'm going to step out of shot for a minute. In here, this little container, I have packets of seeds. Say I want to reap okra, I would open this packet, I'd take the seeds and I'd put them in a seed punnet. If I wanted celery, I wouldn't put the okra in there, I'd put that in there. Now there's my vision. The picture on the packet, it says celery. So when you give an offering, you're sowing a seed. Your seed is not your tithe. That is not your tithe. That is an offering, which is a different thing. So what I'm trying to say to you is that to protect that seed, I need to be tithing first. To be under the, if I want to reap, some of those punnets that are in my propagation table there, where I have followed the biblical principle, I get 100% yield out of every punnet. So if I plant 6 seeds, I get exactly 6. In fact, I looked at the cauliflower earlier. It's a 6-cell punnet, and there looks like there's a good 8, maybe 9. Now I may have accidentally dropped an extra seed in there, but that is more than 100-fold return on my investment. My little punnet is my investment, which is full of potting soil. I put my seed into it. Now I look for good soil, good compost to put my seed into. I don't just drop it in any piece of dirt. I prepare what I want to do. So my offering is worked out before I start. So if I feel to sow into somebody else's mortgage, then what my expectation is to reap to pay my mortgage. If I sow into somebody saving up for a car, my expectation is that I will reap a better car. Now, some people go, "Oh, that's all blab it and grab it." Sure it is. But if I don't blab it, I don't grab it. It's fairly simple. But sadly, I see so many people today missing out, walking in the best that you can possibly have. Now, I'm not dressed I'm down in my greenhouse, I'm not dressed in the most fancy clothes, but if I want fancy clothes, the logical thing is for me to go and sew clothing. I've been very blessed in the last several months, or several years actually. When we built the house here, bought this property, I had a vision of growing food. And I remember telling my wife at the time, because we thought we could grow to sell, but then I had a check in my spirit. No, you're not growing it to sell it, you're growing it to sow it. So this whole system ended up being called Grow to Sow. So it doesn't matter whether it's lettuces, but it gets me back to, I want to come back to this tithe thing though. What I see as the tithe is a protection over, part of the blessing is to have a protection over my offering. So when I put seeds in a punnet and I put it on my propagating bench, I put a dome over it. That's the tithe that's protecting that. It incubates my offering. Now my seed produces. If it's a lettuce seed, it will produce a lettuce, and that means I can sow that lettuce now into somebody else's life. Sowing seed is important. It's separate from your tithe. Your tithe is something that God gives us. He gives us money so that we can sow, to protect, not just to protect our offerings, but to protect every area of our lives. And it's very, very important that we separate the two, because it's too easy to become a bucket plunker. Tithe and offering time, I'll just chuck 20 bucks in there. What is the $20 for? Have you named it? Like I said to you with the seed, either celery or whatever that other one was. I'll have a look again because I can't remember what it was. Okra. So I have to make a conscious decision when I sow my seed that I name my seed. I name the expectation on my seed. Now, I'm a little bit odd in some ways, perhaps, because I tithe to my local church, but I also offer outside my church. Because I can see I want to reap the blessing that's on whoever I'm sowing into. Now, if it's to another ministry, and they're preaching the gospel, then I'm going to reap the reward of preaching the gospel. So I really need to get this across. There is a difference between the tithe and the offering, in as much as the offering produce is a seed sown, but the tithe is a protection over what you have. It's like an insurance policy, essentially. And I suppose the best way I can describe it is like when I plant those seeds, I put those domes over. Nothing can get in there. I create an environment for that seed to germinate. And then I take it from there, because the greenhouse is just basically works on the same principle. It's like a tithe also. It protects the plants from things coming in here and attacking them. Now, believe me, if you live in this state of Queensland, you'll know if you ever grow tomatoes, fruit fly will actually decimate your crop if you don't protect it. So your tithe is essentially protecting everything you have. And I'm using the greenhouse because I'm down here as an analogy, because the picture I got was you must incubate your offerings. If all you're doing is ever offering and never tithing, or you're only tithing and never offering, you can't get a harvest. Now, if you don't offer, you don't get any harvest. You haven't planted a seed. Like in this container, there's lots of seeds of different types. So I'm constantly looking at ways, how can I sow those seeds? Because I need more harvest, because I'm not just feeding me, I want to feed a lot of people. As I said right at the start, it's about grow to sow. Every time I sow a lettuce or a cabbage to somebody, I can name a harvest. I don't have to get a lettuce or cabbage back on that. Those lettuces can be for me to have increase in my income. But when I tithe, I always tithe more than what my income is, because that also sets a benchmark. Like if I want $1,000 a week, the logical thing to do would be to tithe $100 a week, because it's setting a benchmark. Then I offer according to that. But yeah, it's just something that really, I just noticed it was missing. I'm not having a shot at anybody, but there is a difference between the tithe and the offering. They're not the same. I have heard Brother Copeland mention it a few times, like you don't tithe to a itinerant ministry, you tithe to your local church where you get fed every week. The tithe is there for the priest or the pastor. It pays for the running of the church. That's why it's important that we all. Now, I've had people say to me, "Oh, but the tithe is not in the New Testament," and I've hunted high and low, and I mean I hunted to find this great revelation these people are giving me, and they can't give me the chapter and verse. I cannot find anywhere in the New Testament that says the tithe is no longer relevant. And you've got to remember, the New Testament is not wiping out the Old Testament, it's qualifying the Old Testament. It qualifies it. Now, the only way that you can relatively say that the tithe is not relevant in the church today is somewhere in the New Covenant, Matthew through Revelation, it would have to be something that would say the tithe is not important anymore. Yet I find frequently where Paul receives offerings, I would assume that if they're Jewish people, they're still tithing because they know the benefit of the tithe, because they would have read Malachi. I will rebuke the devourer for your sakes, and he shall not destroy your fruits of your ground, neither your vine cast her fruit before time in the field, saith the Lord of hosts. And then it goes on, and in all nations shall ye be called blessed, for ye are a delightsome land, saith the Lord. And I'm almost at a point where I think nations should be tithing to Israel. If they tithe 10% of their gross domestic product, how blessed would that land be? And that probably accounts for why America is so blessed. I know America does, particularly more so under Donald Trump. I see that he has elevated the place of Israel before the nation of America, by moving the embassy, etc. I don't want to get off into that stuff, but I am really interested in knowing other people's opinions on this. Should nations be tithing to Israel? You imagine what it would do for your economy. Israel is one of the most amazing economies. It produces more food per square metre than any other nation in the world. So it tells me something, they have got something that we're missing. But it's interesting, I love that bit in there where it says, I will rebuke the devourer for your sakes, and he shall not destroy your fruits, your tomatoes, your lettuces, your cabbages, your sweet corn, strawberries, you name it, it's in there. The Bible's a gardening book, it's awesome. And I've been through sowing, and John and I are now looking at selling as a form of income, selling certain types of plants, flowers and stuff that you'd use to decorate your yard. And I'd ordered some plants which were really, really hard to get. There was only one company in Australia that could actually supply them to me. And what makes me believe what we're doing is I received today, when they sent it back to me, they sent me this book, which basically tells me how to propagate all those plants that we were querying. How do we do it? John's been playing around with some little trees. But again, you see, God's rebuking our devourer. He's creating an income. I don't mind gardening, but I know gardening is not John's thing, and he's actually starting to see biblical principles in here. But it gets back to this thing of tithing and offering. Now we can plant all the seed we like. If we don't protect it in its germination stages, harden it up properly, when we go to put it out into the ground, it's not going to survive. So we have to have a time. That's why I look at the dome as being like a tithe, a symbol of the tithe. It protects so that we can get our seed established. I'm not, as I say, I'm not having a shot at anyone. I would like to hear more frequently the difference between the tithe and the offering and other people's opinions on it. I have an opinion on it, and I know my son has an opinion on it. And basically that's all I wanted to really say is that there are two separate things. That they're not, I can't just tithe and not offer. If I don't offer, I'm not sowing a seed. I can't expect to harvest. If I only offer, I'm putting the seed, dropping it out on the path almost. I'm not giving it any protection. I'm not putting something there to nurture it, to incubate it. Or incubate the rest of my life, you know. The tithe is really, really important. It's like an incubation or an insurance policy. Anyway, that's about it. I've had my little talk about that one. Thank you for listening.